If a baby is coming, don't worry about what you got, what you don't got. Just throw on some gloves. All that baby needs is somebody to make sure it doesn't hit the floor. It can get really scary to be like, oh my gosh, we need this, we need Sure, that's for later. Okay. Just leave it alone. Just put on some gloves and catch the baby.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now, here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
Hey everybody, Kevin McFarland here from the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast, and thanks as always for downloading this episode, and thanks for listening to the podcast. If you haven't done so yet, please go ahead and hit subscribe on this podcast so you never miss an episode, and don't forget to leave a rating and review. Things like that really help the podcast out and helps nurses like you find a podcast like this. My guest today is a former ER nurse and current OB nurse who has about 3 million friends on TikTok. My guest this week is the amazing Jen Hamilton. If somehow you haven't heard of her, she's a working nurse who also happens to be a content creator and a speaker. Not only that, she's an overall do-gooder. She is the founder of a national nonprofit called the Hot Mess Express. This is a group of moms that go and help rescue other moms when they're overwhelmed. Overall, Jen is a good egg, a positive voice in nursing, and someone I'm thrilled to have on the podcast. Please welcome my friend, Jen.
Yeah, so my name is Jen Hamilton. I have been a nurse for almost 12 years. It'll be 12 years here in a couple months. I started my career in the emergency department, and that was my everything. I was so jazzed to be an ER nurse. I did that for 6 years, and the sixth year that I was there, actually transitioned to management, and that cured me of my love of that. And so I kind of got to a point where I was like, anything but this. And it was one night in the ER. I was, yes, in management, but I had been working days and nights in the same day, working all overnight, not eating, not sleeping. And I found myself in another overnight, the solo triage nurse for 30 patients who had been waiting over 8 hours in the lobby. I was getting called all the names, and there were some pretty traumatic things that came in that night. The kind that, and I know that people will understand it when I say this, the kind that you don't forget, the ones that stick with you. I had two of them back to back.
Wow.
And I just got to a point where I can't sustain this. So I looked on the jobs page, and honestly, I was looking for a schedule change. I was just looking for another job that wouldn't have me at the hospital 7 days a week. And
Right?
so I found a job for labor and delivery, and it was a weekend job. And I was like, "Oh, weekends." But then I was like, "Ugh, labor and delivery." Because I think that most ER nurses agree that we are anaphylactically allergic to pregnant people. They
A-
walk in, I don't
Amen.
care I don't
Amen.
care if
They'll,
it's no, go away.
stand
Yeah.
at the door and be like, "Get out of my ER. Get out.
Yes. Yes,
Go
go
upstairs."
You scare me. I don't like it if there's a patient I cannot see. So, yeah, that was scary to me. I remembered the only thing I really remembered from nursing school about labor and delivery was it was a very wet place. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of juices everywhere.
Oh, okay.
I
Juices. Oh, come on now.
mean, okay, there's a lot of juices in the ER too, I have to say.
Sure.
There's a lot of wetness there,
Mm.
but it did not intrigue me in the way that I think most people think it did. But I shadowed, this was a Friday night that I was like, "F this place, get me out of here." I shadowed on Sunday, and then by the next Friday, I had, interviewed, had the job they gave me the job and everything, so it was a very quick process. Um, and then I was like, "This is so this gives me the same adrenaline that ER does, but in, shorter bursts, I guess."
It's
The way that
it it's that kind of adrenaline based kind of job too.
Yeah, exactly, and drama. Also, the drama is
Oh,
there.
all the drama. All the drama.
Yeah. I worked with another nurse who also came from the ER, and the way that we explained it was that, in the ER, your heart rate is always a little bit elevated, right? You're seeing stuff all the time, so it's a little bit elevated all the time, so that when something crazy happens, it goes up a little bit, but it's not too much of a jump, right? But in labor and delivery, everything's going smooth, your heart rate's 62 on the regular, and then when something crazy happens, it's 140, you know? So, you get the same kind of, adrenaline drama that you do in the ER, but it's very specific usually. So there's the opportunity to kinda be, instead of a jack of all trades, which I was in the ER, like, I know a little bit about everything, I can take care of you. In labor and delivery now, having been doing it for so many years, like, we have just probably 5 or 6 emergencies that we see.
Yeah.
There's very rarely times where I'm like, "Oh, no, what do we do?" Um, so I love that part of it, that I can walk into a situation and feel that same calmness. I'm so grateful for my ER experience, because I have this level of calm about me in the chaos. But anyways, I got this job on labor and delivery. The pandemic hit. I ended up downloading an app called TikTok. I'm sure no one has heard of that. And I started just making videos about labor and delivery because a lot of our patients are getting their perinatal education on the internet,
Good
and a
point.
lot of time making decisions based on the things that they see on the internet that may or may not be true. So I started making videos. Some of them are silly, some of them are educational, some of them are touching, but somehow I have amassed 3.4 million friends on there. And my life is crazy now. So I have the opportunity to talk to nurses and educate patients, and it's just an amazing life.
That's amazing. 3.5 million people follow you? Holy cow, that's a lot.
Yeah. It's a few more friends than I ever thought I would have in my life.
Just with the podcast, I'm like sometimes amazed that like I'm like, wow, this many people listen to this podcast. I was like, I thought it was gonna be like me and my 5 family members that listen to the
Yeah.
podcast. And
Yeah.
sure enough, I've been blessed with that more people like that, more people than that dig this. But
Oh yeah.
3.5 million, holy cow.
It's
Do you,
it's
do you get recognized all the time?
Yeah, and it's always fun too because, I just see them as friends I've never met before. My husband and I went to lunch yesterday and the waitress was like, "I really love your TikToks." And then as we were leaving, I was checking out at the cashier place and the cashier was like staring at me and she's like, "Do you watch TikTok?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "You look just like this nurse that I follow on there." And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And she's like, "No, no, it's not." She started crying, and I was like, "I did not ever think that I would have this effect on people." I was like, "I hope these are good tears." But,
That's cool.
yeah, it's so fun. It's so fun to meet people who, appreciate what you do in the comfort of your own bed
It's
talking to a phone.
right? It's super humbling. Like, it's super humbling to me. It's super
Yeah.
humbling. Like, I had one woman, I was at an ENA conference. I had one woman come up and she like gave me a hug. And she goes, "I feel like we're best friends." And I was like, "Me too." And I was like, "I have no
Yeah.
idea who you are." But but it's just super cool. And for that many people, holy cow, that's just amazing. That's very cool.
Thank you.
So how exciting. Now now is it still mostly TikTok or like, so I don't look at TikTok as much, but I see all your videos on Instagram,
Yeah,
which
so I have about 300,000 on Instagram. I will say TikTok is my home, Instagram is my beach home. It's like the place that I go every once in a while. Instagram can be ruthless. I find that there's Instagram and Facebook. I think that, it's not as kind of a place all the time. So, I find myself more at home on TikTok, but yeah, I am there, I am in all the places, just more on TikTok for sure.
that's very cool. That's very cool. I downloaded TikTok and got an account on TikTok, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I could start doing some videos." Yeah, because I do videos all the time on Instagram,
Yeah.
but I haven't really jumped into TikTok much. And, like, it's, like, every time I open it up, I'm like, "I don't know." So,
Yeah, you really need to try it. It's
I
the
feel
it's
old saying that, so I'm like, "Ah, it's what the kids use, I don't know."
health trend.
Well, how exciting is that? And what a cool way to influence a lot of nurses.
Mhm.
Um and really kind of make a change in nursing. Like that's amazing.
That's the goal for sure.
For sure. That's cool. And now what people may not know about you is that you before you became a labor and delivery nurse, you did that ER piece. And apparently some of your fans knew that because your fans were like, "Oh my gosh, you got to get her on the podcast."
Really? I love that they were vouching for me for
Yeah,
that.
they're like, "Oh, you got to get her on the podcast."
Yeah.
And then there was a story, and I seen on one of your TikToks, there was a story about Pam Bartley being responsible for one of your pregnancies.
It's
And
true.
I'm like, I love Pam Bartley. Love
Yeah.
Pam Bartley. Do you live near her? Are you like in that
No, so I took one of her, uh, like, uh, what do you call it? CEN, courses in Fayetteville, North
okay.
Carolina, which is a few hours from where I am. Where does she live even? I know she
She's
has, like, a farm.
she's like a farm in like South Carolina. I think it's either
Yeah,
South Carolina or North Carolina. Like it's all those small states on the East Coast,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
where
Yeah.
are you, by the way?
I'm in Asheboro, North Carolina, so, like, right smack in the center of the state. So
Okay.
I traveled to,
Okay.
Fayetteville for this little 2-day, Pam Bartley course. Love her, by the way, she's so fantastic.
Amazing. Amazing woman.
Such a
Like
dynamic educator. Like,
huge
there
fan.
were things I learned in that course that I still remember, even though you take it to get the letters behind her name.
Yep.
Everybody does the same thing, but yeah, she's such a dynamic educator. She has just such fun ways of helping you learn. But yeah, she is responsible for my second child because, going to that, uh, class, I had left my birth control on the couch. Uh, and fun fact, this is way too much information, but we'll just get into it. So, I passed out whenever, I was getting an IUD placed. It was very painful, and whenever I woke up, I had apparently kicked my doctor in the face. You know how some people when they vagal, they like stretch out, like their muscles tense up? Kicked him, and then whenever I woke up, I was like, "Did you do it?" And he's like, "Oh, hell no. You're on pills now." So, but I'm such a bad pill taker that I taped my birth control pack to my phone and set an alarm so that I would not get pregnant. And it worked. It worked for 3 years. My mom said, "You look like a hoe." And I said, "At least I'm not a pregnant hoe." So yeah, I missed my birth control, but I took it as soon as I got home the next day. But with birth control, if you don't take it at the exact same time, you can get pregnant. And, I knew it, like, as soon I should've yeah, I knew it. I was like, "Dang." So, yeah, I blame her for the blessing of my second child.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, I mean, she's caused a lot of things, but I don't think that's been one of them. So,
Yeah,
I'll
I think
definitely
yeah, I think that she should own that. That's what an honor to be to bring life into the world.
right, right, to be responsible for bringing in a life.
That's right.
Well, I'll definitely tag her when I post this because
Please
she'll
do.
just think that's hilarious. So that she did. I did a podcast with her a long time ago about the CEN review, and it's still like it's like in my top 5 most downloaded episodes. Like she's
Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
And we keep threatening to do another one, and we just haven't gotten it together and done it. So we need to.
Pam,
It's
get on
been
the
years.
podcast.
Pam,
Yeah,
get on the
Pam, when you
podcast.
listen to this, it's your turn. You're up.
Yeah, that's right. It's time to step back up. So how funny is that? That's an amazing story. So I want to tap into your specific experience because I think that again we talk about that kind of rift between labor and delivery and ER nursing. So so first let me tell you a little scenario. And I don't know if we can leave this in the podcast or not. I don't know because I try
Figure
to
it out.
I try to keep stuff from work out of the podcast because I
Yeah,
don't want to get in trouble. And then
right.
every now and then, like I try to stay under the radar, and then
Yeah.
like all of a sudden someone at work will be like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast," or "Hey, I didn't know you had a podcast." I'm like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, okay, yes." Um, and it's not like I hide it, but I'm not like like
Right.
Hi, I'm
Yeah,
Kevin. Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a podcaster.
right.
Um, so And how does that work for you? How does your organization feel about what you do? That's a good question.
Yeah, so there have been a few, people that have been upset that I do what I do, right? So, um, like coworkers, originally, whenever I started making videos of educational content online, what I was told is like, it is not professional for a nurse to be on TikTok explaining things, right? But my rebuttal to that is that this is where the pregnant people are. And so there are people who are going to be filling this space, whether it's evidence based or not. So I would rather have evidence based information that is being given on this application uh, than just, oh no, it's not professional, and then just allow people to not have all the information they need whenever they come in. So I'd kind of just like poo pooed on that. Like, okay, whatever. But, you know, there have been a couple people that have, like, seen my videos and then reported them to my work. For instance, like, uh, I talked about how I support whether you breastfeed or not, and someone who was very pro breastfeeding that we should always, you know, try to have everyone breastfeed, they got upset that I, would support whatever you wanna do. So but my work is pretty much like, "Okay, whatever." Like, they'll talk to me and then, "Okay." But I have not had, anything major happen. But I try to keep it very, very professional as far as, like, I never show where I work, I don't wear my badge, I've never, ever, ever done a TikTok at work. I think that that can get people into a lot of trouble, and every time I see someone else as a nurse
Uh,
TikToking at work, I'm like,
aren't you like
"No."
I do the same thing. I like see people record videos at work and I'm like, don't do that. Like
Yes,
you're gonna get in
mortified,
trouble. You're gonna get in
yeah,
trouble.
and if I ever talk about, like, stories of things that have happened, I will change details, that, still kind of vibe with what I'm trying to get across, um, but also I wait a long time before putting it out there, you know?
It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. I do the same thing. Like if I have something that happens at work that I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to talk about this. Like
You gotta
I'll
let it simmer.
yeah, I'm like, I can't talk about this right now. Like
Yeah.
we had this beautiful thing that happened at work where we had this husband and wife who were both in the hospital. One was in the ICU, one was in the medical, and they died within minutes of each other.
Oh.
Like both, right? They both died like within minutes of each other. And I'm like, oh my God, this is such an amazing story. This is so great.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I can't share that right now. Like
yeah,
I recorded that video. I recorded that video and was like, okay, I'm going to record this. And I set a reminder on my phone. I'm like, I'll post that like sometime next year. So
yeah, exactly,
like
exactly.
I'll post it down. It'll still be as an impactful story. Um, but then my boss is going to be like, that didn't happen. Like
Yeah,
that didn't
yeah,
happen. And, and today we had such a, yeah, or to last night, we had kind of a similar situation where I was like going, oh my gosh, this is like perfect timing.
yeah,
Um,
and the beauty of the podcast is that we record this now and it comes out later, you know what
Yeah,
I'm
it's
saying?
gonna be it's gonna be a month at least till I get this out
Yeah,
anyway. Um, and I posted something on Facebook. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be interviewing a labor and delivery nurse, and what questions would you have for the labor and delivery nurse? So I'm gonna pull that up before we're done. Um, but and then the very first person, like the very first person to reply, was a friend of mine who goes, "Is it Jen Hamilton?" And
okay.
she's like a fanatic fan of yours.
Oh, well, tell her that I said hello.
And she is my former Houston
Oh,
ENA wife, so she's
yeah.
amazing.
What's her
Um,
name?
her name's Kelsey. So you gotta
Kelsey,
see
hello, friend. Hello,
so
best friend. Hi.
there you go. She's gonna be thrilled for that. Tell me about how the transition went from you going from emergency department to labor and delivery. That had to be a big change.
It was a very interesting transition from ER to labor and delivery because in the ER, I could have up to sometimes 6 patients to myself. And if you're in triage, forget about that number, like 30 plus.
Yeah, yeah.
So Then going on to labor and delivery, and they're like, "Here's your one patient." I was like, "Where are the rest of them?" You
Yeah, you're
know?
like, that's it?
1 or 2 patients is max. So I was shook. I was like, "This is wrong." But what I realized was that, you don't just have the one patient, you have somebody you can't see, who can't talk to you, who's only talking to you through a strip that you have to constantly be assessing. So, like, I get it, but it was a very different. I mean, I was happy about that transition, don't get me wrong, because I was like, "Hell yeah, one patient, sign me up for that all day long." Um, but also because of those staffing, uh, requirements, you know, we can say we don't have the staff, to accommodate patients upstairs, which is totally unfair to the ER because y'all don't either. Um, but just like any inpatient unit, I lump labor and delivery into that because just like they can say, "Oh, we don't have a nurse," or, "Oh, we don't have a room," uh, it's true. And then y'all have to take the brunt of that, and I hate it. I hate it for you because I get it on the other end.
Yeah, the
Definitely I get it.
one of the things I always tell people, and I always remind the staff, I remind everyone not in the ER, is the ER is the only place in the hospital that can't say no,
Yep,
right?
the only
Like,
place, and that's why you get dumped on.
yeah, they get dumped on because they can't say no. And, sometimes I'm the one doing the dumping, right? But the reality is they can't say no. Like, a patient shows up, you're like, "Okay." They're like, "Well," the other day we had all of our rooms filled and hall beds to boot, and then, we get a call and say, "Hey, we have a code 3, you know, code on the way to your hospital." I'm like, "I don't even have a room for this code," right?
Yeah. Yep.
But you're like, "Okay,
You
we'll
make
get
it.
ready."
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get
Uh,
ready. Like, get that guy's not that sick, get him out in the hall. And they're like
right.
they're like, "He's still pretty sick." And I'm like, "Keep him close in the hall, but he's
Yep.
gotta go in the hall."
Yep.
So, and it's and, the ER doesn't get to say no. They're,
Yep.
they're and that's different, and every other unit can.
Yep. And that's a
Mm.
beautiful thing for the units that can, but I remember that feeling of just desperation in the ER because one time I even called, like, our, like, hospital emergency response system or whatever, like, the kind that you would use if you had, like, a mass casualty situation.
Yeah.
Because I walked to work and we had 25 beds, okay? All 25 were holds. Admitted patients upstairs, all 25, okay? I had not one room to put a patient into, and so I was like, "I don't care who needs to know about this, but the president gonna know about this
Everyone's gonna know
today."
about this.
Exactly, and so I did get in a little bit of trouble because 'cause they're like, "That's not what that's for," and I was like, "It sure did get me some help though, real quick."
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't regret that, but yeah, it is the place where no one is coming to rescue you. You have to figure it out
Yep.
yourself.
Yeah, the ER is one of the only places that whatever they get, they get. Whatever they have, they have. But,
That's
the
right.
labor and delivery compared to the ER, it can be a crazy place. But, again, it's I think my assumption is, and from what I see from our labor and delivery department, is it's a little bit more calm until it's not.
Exactly,
Like,
yes,
when
yeah.
when I get the call and they're like, "Hey, we need you up here now." I'm like, "I'm running up there because I know things are
I need
bad."
it. Yes.
But a lot of times I go up there and they're, like, just chilling.
Yep. Yeah, I think that our level of I'm just gonna say, like, adult a regular, like, medical adult emergency, the kind that's not obstetric, our thresholds as labor and delivery for shenanigans with that is very low, you know?
Oh, yeah.
When someone starts to decompensate, ugh, you know?
Out. Yeah.
My favorite story of kinda using my ER skills in, labor and delivery was I had a patient, it was her 2nd baby. Her 1st baby was a C-section, so she's what we call a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after cesarean. And whenever I was checking her in, I was asking her about her medical problems, any problems with this pregnancy, and she said no, and her husband was giving her a look like, "Okay, you gotta tell her," you know? And she said, "Well, I felt like my heart was beating really fast sometimes, but they, checked me out, sent me to a cardiologist, and, it was just, uh, anxiety." So she said, "I guess I'm just anxious." So I just keep that in the back of my mind, you know? Um, and so later on in the day, she calls me in and she's like, "I'm just feeling really anxious." I put a pulse ox on her and it's like 90, but I never believe it. I never believe it at all. And so I feel for a radial pulse. She ain't got one. So I know her blood pressure's pretty low. And so then I put on a stethoscope and I listened to her and it's like do 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 do. And so I told her, I was like, "Hey, you know, you weren't anxious, and your heart's going a little bit too fast." And I kind of had a few moments with her to kind of prepare her for what was about to happen. Because I knew that as soon as some labor and delivery nurses bust up in there, it's going to be like
Rapid
a
response.
code situation, you know? And so I prepared her and I called the doctor and I was like, "Hey, can you please come to this room?" And she walks in and I said, "Hey, like 99% sure she's in SVT." And, she's like, "No, no, no, she's got anxiety." And I just handed her my stethoscope, and I was like, "SVT." So she put on her stethoscope. She's like, "Oh, well, shit. Yeah, she is." And, I we were able to, convert her out of it just by me starting another IV because she was so nervous about it. She bageled herself out. But then later on in the day, I'm sitting at the desk, and I see her baby go down. And the call bell happens at the same time, and I'm like, "Oh, crap." So I go in there, and she's like, "I just feel really bad." You know how they look. And, of course, it was happening again, and we had paged cardiology at this time, like, before just, for a consult, and, they get there around the same time, which was great because we ended up having to do an emergency C-section because her baby went down, and we couldn't convert her out of it with non-medicinal ways, right? So, what ended up happening was we were cardioverting her in the hallway on 2 wheels going down for a C-section. Her blood pressure was, 60/30, her heart rate was 220. I needed to change my shorts after that.
Bet.
But, afterwards, after everything was fine, I was like, "Hell yeah!" Like, that, like, in adrenaline that you get in the ER whenever something's crazy, but then it turns out okay. Like, that was
Like
my
like afterwards, you're like, "That was awesome."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was great. It wasn't for her, but it was.
That's that's like one of the scariest things. I think and I think that's one of the things that ER nurses are like so afraid of. It's like, what if you have to do like an emergency C-section or crash C-section or something like
Yeah,
that? Like,
bedside or something wild. Yeah.
yeah. One of the wildest things I seen as an ER nurse. We had a patient who came in and she was a gunshot wound to the chest and she was very, very pregnant.
No.
Yeah. And she came in and the paramedic who brought her in, and I'll never forget this guy. It was his first clinical shift as a paramedic student.
No!
And he
Bless his
brings
heart.
bless his heart, right? And he brings this patient in. And of course, he's bringing it into the level 1 trauma center, and like everyone's nervous about this patient. Like we knew what exactly was coming in the door. Everybody was there. Anesthesia was there. OB was there. Neonate was there. Like the whole everybody. Like
Yeah.
our trauma room. We had a 2-bay trauma room, and both bays were filled with people, right? How we had the baby warmer in there and all that stuff. And we before the patient got there, they're like, "Okay, if we need to do a crash C-section," trauma surgeon's like, "OB, like, we're gonna do this, like, right now." Like,
Yeah.
well, sure enough, we bring this girl in. This guy's trying to give reports just as fast as he can so he can get out of there. And he's running out the door, and I like grabbed him, like, "No, no, come back. You got to see what's happening here." And I brought him back into the room, and they did a crash C-section on this woman right there, and like opened this woman up, like filleted her open like a fish, just opened her up, worked on getting the baby out. They get the baby out. They get this limp baby over to the baby warmer, and then the next thing you know, you hear that cry of the baby, and you're like,
Ugh. The amount of relief. I mean, I felt it just whenever you're
just the story
explaining
is
it.
enough to go,
Yeah,
"Ugh." And
yeah.
I'll never forget, and I'm like, I go, you may feel bad 'cause you didn't save this life, but you saved that life."
The mom didn't make it and the baby
Oh,
did.
yeah, baby's mom was way dead. Mom was, like, way dead.
Oh my.
She had a huge hole in her chest, but baby made it. And
What?
Baby didn't do real well, but baby did make
Yeah.
it.
Wow,
So
that's crazy. So, do you know what happened? Like, what the story was?
it was a domestic. It was a domestic,
Oh,
and
God, that's
yeah,
awful.
yeah. And I think he shot her fully intending that nobody would live through that.
Right.
Um, but the baby lived.
Oh gosh, that is crazy. That is a crazy story.
Crazy story. And it's one of those, and, it's one of those in those, ER stories that you just never, you'll never forget. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't unsee that, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure
so
you could close your eyes right now and fully be back in that room.
100%. Like, I still to this day remember exactly what the woman looked like. Know exactly what the woman looked like. I remember exactly what the C-section was like. I remember all the faces in the room. Like, I remember all that.
Yeah.
And I have a terrible memory, and I remember all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it, like, imprints on your soul when you see stuff like that.
That's a good way to put it. It imprints on
Yeah.
your soul, 'cause it absolutely does. There's a there's a handful of patients, that there's a handful there's a million patients you never remember, but there's a handful of patients you'll never forget.
Absolutely.
So, any other OB patients that you'll never forget?
Oh, I have so many. I'll save it for the book. I got
Okay.
it. I have so many though, but yeah, there's what I tell my patients, because sometimes I'll see them later in the world, be at the store and they come up to me like, "Oh my gosh, you delivered my baby." Well, first of all, you look very different when you're pregnant versus not pregnant. But the other thing is, I never want people to be offended if like their face slips my mind or like the story slips my mind because if you are somebody who is not sticking out, that means that things went really well. And, it's those ones where things don't go well, or it's just like a crazy situation where we're having to really fight for you or, that those are the ones that really, really stick with you. And so, I always try my hardest to remember everybody, but just like being in the ER, you see so many people that it's just impossible to remember every single person, by name and, um, yeah, but there are the ones that imprint on you for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, and very few, like, yeah, again, there's a handful of patients that, like, I would be like, "I remember you. I've taken care of you."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We had a my during my labor and deli so my labor and delivery, I did a labor and delivery rotation for nursing school, of course, and I had the most amazing time. It was like the best labor and delivery rotation anyone's ever had. I got to see, like, I think I got to see like 3 or 4 or 5 deliveries. I don't remember. It was like way more.
Amazing.
It was
Normal,
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah.
normal, not normal. And, one of the deliveries, they're like, "Hey, we're gonna do a scheduled C-section. Do you wanna go in and see the C-section?" I was like, "Yeah, I wanna go see the C-section." So, I go into the C-section, go into the little OR suite, and the couple's there, and it's nice, sweet young couple, and they were talking about, they knew the baby had this genetic disease. I don't remember what it was. I should remember. Um had this genetic disease that they knew the baby was gonna have this, their other baby had that, like, it was, like, something, like, they knew was gonna be an issue, and, they ended up doing the C-section, and I'm, talking to the guy and talking to the woman, and, then she does C-section, everything goes well, it goes, swimmingly well. Baby comes out, baby is as expected, healthy, doing good, like, it was gonna have this GI issue, I forgot what, but, nothing unexpected.
Yeah.
Years later, I was working as a pediatric ER nurse, and this couple brings in this baby, and they had 2 kids, and they're like, "Yeah, they both have this disease," and I was like,
Your brain is doing a little tickle. You're
my
like,
brain was like,
"Sweet."
"Wait, this sounds familiar,"
Yeah.
and, they're like, "Have we seen you before?" They go, "You used to work at this hospital, right?" And I was like, "No, but but that yeah, I was there when this one was born," right? I'm sitting there
So
going, I was
crazy.
there when this baby was born, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you were there. You were like a student or something." And I was like, "Yeah, I was a nursing student."
Wow. The fact that you both remembered each other, it's a big deal. That's crazy.
It's crazy. Well, fast forward, like, probably, I don't know, probably 10 years later, I'm interviewing a guy for a job at that same hospital,
No.
It's him.
No!
It's him. And
What?
he's like, yeah, it's him. And he's like, I remember you. He's like, he goes, you were there when my son was born. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I was. I was like, that's crazy. And
It's weird.
we ended up hiring the guy and we're still friends. And like, but for guy, every time, we'd be in the room together. He's like, this is Kevin. He was there when my son was born. Like, oh, I didn't know you guys were friends. And like, we're not.
We're not. Yeah. Life was like, you have to be friends. Like,
life,
we're gonna
life
spend
was
this
like, life
time.
was like, you guys are going to kind of know each other for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like it was, just crazy. And it's kind of small town kind of
Yeah.
nonsense, but it was, I was like, that's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I I had the most amazing time when I did labor and delivery rotation, and still, I think labor and delivery is kinda cool. Like, I would never do it, but it's cool.
Right. Right.
Um, but what traumatized me in labor and delivery, this is what traumatized me. I was watching a woman labor, the baby was coming out, the woman shits everywhere.
Yeah.
I know
That
that happens, and this nurse just
happens.
takes an OR towel, sets
Uh-huh.
it down, goes, "That's fine, honey, keep going." And
Yeah. Yep.
I'm like, "But there's poop right there." And they're like,
Yeah.
It's fine."
Yep. I call myself a poop ninja because I will make it go away very quickly. Because it happens, it really happens, and that's something that people are mortified of, like, sometimes they're more scared of that than the actual birth, and so, what I tell people is that if I wasn't okay with poop, I would not work here.
It just it happens, like, it's just,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
just
my
one of
worst
the
poop
things.
story was that I had a poor lady one time, she was so desperately wanting to go into labor on her own, um, and she took the advice of some family members who told her to try castor oil. And I'm slow blinking right now because that could really get it going for you.
It's gonna
And
get something going.
it did, and, um, the poor thing pooped the whole time. Like, and I'm not talking just, like, a little bit.
No.
It it was and it was all I could do just to make sure that she felt okay, safe in that moment, like, "Okay, this is okay, because she's not the only one, that poop happens a lot, but, it definitely put a damper on her labor experience because she was so, upset.
Yeah. Well, holy cow. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
The last question I always ask all my guests, and I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna ask you to kinda target it specifically for, ER nurses thinking about labor and delivery. But the last question I always ask is a question called 3 things. I ask people to
uh-huh,
come up with 3 things an ER nurse should always remember and 3 things they should just forget.
okay,
And what I'm gonna ask you to do is kinda target it towards what are 3 things about labor and delivery, the birth process, pregnant women, newborn babies, whatever the case may be. What are 3 things an ER nurse should always remember, and what are 3 things just forget? Like, it's not a thing, it's false
sure,
news.
yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, alright, so these things I want you to remember, okay? If a baby is coming, don't worry about what you got, what you don't got, just throw on some gloves. All that baby needs is somebody to make sure it doesn't hit the floor. It can get really scary to, like, be like, "Oh my gosh, we need this, we need Sure, that's for later, okay? Just leave it alone. Just put on some gloves and catch the baby. Um, Number 2 would be to remember always to ask about their pregnancy history. Because, we can know that, like, okay, we're 38 weeks with this baby, no pregnancy problems with this baby. But, she's had 3 C-sections before, and, you know, they could be coming in labor, and we need to know that this person is, like, increased risk for, uterine rupture, that kinda stuff. There are certain things that have happened in, pregnancy history that can be very, very important. Always remember that we are here. You know what I'm saying? If you have a question, if you're not sure about something, please call us. We will be happy to talk you through it. Um, we love feeling like we know stuff, So if you call us, We're going to be honored that you asked. So some things to just forget about. Feeling like you got to cut the cord right away if you have a delivery in the ER. You can leave that baby attached till the cows come home. Like, if you're worried about trying to do everything in a certain way, just leave all you gotta do is leave the baby attached. Get snuggle with the mom. It's okay. Um, you can forget, um, about this is a hard one. I want you to not think that pregnancy is a disease that has the contagious disease that has to be dealt with immediately. We do get a lot of, like, emergent, "This baby's coming right now," and then the patient comes up and they're just chilling. Like, there are certain things that you can see in somebody to know, like, it's coming or it's not coming. But even if it's coming, it's okay. It's okay. So never forget just to chill out. That's a good one. Chill out. Um, and then never forget, just
Always
forget.
forget. Just forget.
Always forget. I was getting confused. Always forget, um oh, this one's hard. Can I change it just a little bit? Because
Yeah.
I have one that I think is very important,
Oh, let's
okay?
hear it. Let's hear it.
And it's going to be a never forget, okay?
Okay.
Never forget that your patient is human, okay? I hear horror stories of patients that go through miscarriages in the ER, right? And
Happens all the time.
that's a very scary thing to happen in a very scary place. So, honoring the life of their baby is very, very important. And I know that we're so, so busy in the ER, but even just having, like, compassionate communication and doing what you can to make sure that they feel supported and heard in that time, um, I I know how hard it is as a caregiver, as somebody especially in the ER, because it's not even, like, your jam. The pregnancy stuff is not your jam, but humanity is, so recognizing that these are scary things to the patients. No matter what you're in the ER for, it's a scary thing, but it's especially hard when you're losing a baby. So never forget that they are human, and so are we, and we need to come together in our humanity when it happens.
Absolutely right. That's great advice. What do you what do you think, and I don't wanna take up too much more of your time, but what do you think of, all these laws that are affecting women's reproduction rights? Like,
Oh, man. Yeah.
so I've done a couple podcasts, with a woman named Lisa Wolf, and Lisa Wolf is a researcher for ENA, and she's, like, this is her cross she's gonna die on. Uh,
Yeah.
per her, she's like, "Oh my gosh, like, women's reproductive rights, it's just like, the violation of women's rights is just sad."
Yeah, it really is, and so I grew up, like, Southern Baptist, very pro-life, like, I remember being in youth group, and we would talk about, pro-life stuff. Nothing could have prepared me for the reality check that I would get when caring for women during pregnancy. Because what I found is that it wasn't like, and what I think, a lot of people want you to believe is just that people are out here just waking up on a Tuesday and getting abortion for fun.
Nobody's
It is not that. That is, I mean, nobody wants to have an abortion. And so some things that I learned that I didn't know before was that it's not always like a DNC or, like, where they're going in and, like, scraping parts out. That's not always what it is. It could be I had a patient who was 17 weeks and her water broke, and she's got several more weeks till viability, and she got infected so she got chorioamnionitis, and because her baby still had a heart rate, us just giving her a pill to put her into labor to allow her baby to come out, because we knew that would lead to the demise of her baby. We had you're walking this fine line of, like, when is sick enough, you know? Because yes, of course, there are exceptions for the life of the mother, but when is that? it's just, like, left to the judgment of
And who
whoever.
decides? Yeah.
Yeah, there could be, 2 different doctors who disagree on when that is, and so when you take that decision away from the person who is affected by it the most, you're playing with their life, and so it's not only just their life, but also their reproductive life, and that patient in particular that I was talking about, this was an IVF baby, like, she already had trouble getting pregnant, and when you have an infected uterus and you let that go until the life of the mother is at risk, you can affect their future fertility, so there was no universe in which this baby would live, right? It would just not gonna happen. But there was definitely a universe in which we could, allow her body to pass this baby and to get rid of the infection so that we could save her and her fertility. But what I learned is just that there's never a black and white. It's never black and white. And just because you wouldn't get one, I'm not saying you, but like a person who is very pro just because someone else wouldn't get one does not mean that you can look at someone and say, "You can't do that for yourself?" So, what started as me being very pro-life, like, "Oh my gosh, save all the babies," turned into, I am pro all of the life, including the mother and her
Who's in front of
family. Yeah, and
me?
also, that being pro all of the life, led me to understanding that now I am pro-choice because it is so important that we protect that decision for her. Like, I can't imagine being put in that position to have to make that decision, but when you tell her that decision is off the table, I mean, I can't imagine. I have a friend who, has whenever she makes babies, she has some genetic thing that her babies don't develop with kidneys, and so, she's faced with a choice, and this was how her doctor put it to her, that she could terminate or she could carry her baby to term. I'm putting quotes around this, carry her baby to term, and then when her baby is born, watch her baby suffocate and die. What kind of choice is that? Like, there's no good option, it's just whatever she believes is the most humane, and that is her decision to make as that child's mother. So, I just think that if there's anyone listening to this who is vehemently pro-life, I urge you to listen to the stories of women who are affected by these very restrictive, um, abortion bans, because it's not the people that you think are being affected. It's the people who are truly, they need this, and whenever you say that, you can't for any reason, it just affects things way more than you ever think it would.
Absolutely right. It's kinda crazy, and I think, nurses are kinda getting stuck in the middle here, so
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
that is, another topic that I'm sure is going to continue to, go on and for long for a while, so
I don't know that it will ever be resolved because I think that, every year politically, it's always going to be used as a pawn one way or the other. So, I
yep, you're right.
think that as long as it keeps us divided, I think that it's probably gonna just be a topic for sure.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So, this has been so much fun. I'm so glad we finally got a
Oh,
chance
I
to
could
do
talk to you for
this,
hours. Yes.
right? I know, I feel like we've known each other forever, right?
I know.
So, where did you say you were again?
I'm in Asheboro, North Carolina, so right in the center.
Oh, okay. There's a conference called the Southeastern Seaboard Conference. I was just looking at that. It's in Greenville this year. They go
Okay, yeah, yeah.
South Carolina, North Carolina, and I think they used to do Virginia. I think they mostly do South Carolina, North Carolina now. Oh my God, what a fun one of the funnest nursing conferences I've ever been to.
Really? Oh, that's amazing.
Oh
And
yeah,
they're
yeah.
they're super fun.
Nursing conferences are super fun. They always do like a themed party, like a costume themed
Yes.
party.
Yeah.
And my favorite story from there is I was up doing a presentation And just as I was getting my presentation started, I was having some AV trouble. So the AV guy was there working on my computer. And this woman comes up and puts a note in my hand. And I
Oh,
take the note and put it in my pocket and didn't look at it. And I was like, okay, there's only two reasons someone's going to put a note in your hand when you're standing in front of a crowd. Either my fly is down or like
right.
somebody died. And I'm like going,
I'm
probably nobody died.
third option. Yeah.
Probably
Go
no one
for
died. So I'm sitting there going, okay, in my head, I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I'm standing in front of all these people and my fly is probably down, or, like maybe I have toilet paper hanging out my backside or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm, sitting in my head and I'm still talking the whole time and thinking in the back of my head, like, okay, how do I do this? So I walk around where the podium where the guy's there. I check my flies, zip my fly out, walk
Yeah.
back around and, and still keep talking. And, later at the party, this woman comes up and goes, I was so stressed. She's like, I handed you that note. You didn't read it. And you didn't read it. And you just, and the next thing you know, I'm watching like a hawk, but now your
Yeah.
fly is up. And she's like, I never seen you do it.
No, it was your fly.
I was
I
like, "Yeah, it
thought
was
you
my
were
fly. My
trying to
fly was
commercial
down.
or something.
My fly was down." So I was like going, okay, okay. And then I had the little note and I took a picture of it and put it on Facebook and it said, a little note that said, your fly is down. And
Good.
she goes, we were all sitting there at the table, like everyone's seen it. And we were like going, oh my God, I hope he knows. And then I, of course, didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she goes, I didn't even see you zip it up. But next thing you know, it's like taken care of. And I'm like wondering, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah. 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 It's
And
hilarious.
I just laughed. I was like, that's, that'll be a forever memory of that conference. So,
Yeah.
and I'm going back there. I'm going to be there in April. I'm going to be there in April for their conference, April and May, April 29th and May. Um,
Fun
it's gonna be a blast. I'm super looking forward to it. So, do you do any speaking? Do you do
all the time. Yep. I'm gonna be speaking. So this year, my biggest speaking thing is at the AWON conference. It's like the ENA of labor and
Mhm.
delivery.
Yeah,
Um, and so that'll be in front of about 3,500, 4,000 people.
a lot of people.
Yeah, so I spoke all, at a bunch of different places last year,
Yeah.
like a lot of Midwestern states, North Carolina, California, mm, a lot speaking a lot of the time to nurses, which is my favorite group to talk to.
Yep,
We get each other. And
yep.
so mainly just trying to fill their suitcases with language for compassionate, empathetic, trauma-informed care. And because of that, I found myself in some interesting situations where my first big like labor delivery nursing conference that I did, um, I said the word queef in that speech. And so my husband was like, Did he really? Did he really just say and yeah, I did. And then I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna own it." I'm just gonna because queefing happens in labor, and that's fine, and so we're gonna talk about it.
I and like it didn't even phase me. I was like,
Yeah,
and
okay.
like
Yeah. The ER nurses get that, I think, way more than, like, I'll say
everyone
management
else,
of what?
and then everyone else, they get that more than
Yeah,
everyone else.
basically. And I think that's where it comes from in me, like saying queef, fart, whatever. That's where it comes from. It's the ER it's my ER soul, because
Yep.
I'm not afraid of those. So, yeah, I love doing it. It's so much fun, and I would have never considered it if somebody hadn't asked me to do a TED Talk, for the very first one. I was like, "Man, maybe I should look
It's
into that."
I've taken up way more of your time than I expected to, but thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm super excited that
I'm
we're getting a
honored.
chance to.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate tonight. It was awesome. It's so
Thank you so
cathartic
much.
to talk to somebody who, I we can jive together because I know that you get it, and, I don't know. Being in the ER is like a life experience that changes you, and I think that when I talk to people who have been there, it's just so nice.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.